Welcome back to Shaboom. I'm your host, Rick K. Jones, and today is our last episode of Season 1, and I hope it will be meaningful to you. You know, we started this little experience talking all about baby boomers to baby boomers. Today, I want to speak directly to the baby boomers who are out there watching and or listening to us. You know, when you get to the final episode of your show, there's a little bit of melancholy that goes into it because you're sad. You're sad that, hey, this is the last show of the season. And so I wanted to play kind of a melancholy song today that I think is really special. One of my favorite songwriters ever is the great Cindy Walker. Cindy Walker was a female songwriter, country songwriter from a little teeny town in Texas. She married once for a very short time. The rest of her life, she lived with her mother. And every year, she and her mother would come to Nashville for a month from Texas. And during that month, she would play her songs. And people would buy her songs and record her songs. She supposedly wrote over 40 songs for the great Bob Wills. So she wrote a lot of Texas swing music. One of my favorite Texas swing bands is a band called Asleep at the Wheel, and they've done a lot of tribute albums to the great Bob Wills. This is an album called Ride with Bob, and this is the last song on that album. It is a classic song by Cindy Walker called Going Away Party. Who sings it? The great Willie Nelson, backed up by Manhattan Transfer. You're going to like this song. All right, I don't want to continue to wallow in melancholy. So the second song on the playlist is a little more fun. Michael Jackson had so many great songs and was such a part of our lives, the soundtrack of our lives in so many ways. But my favorite Michael Jackson song of all time is the title track to his album, Off the Wall. Here's Off the Wall. And if you're not dancing, there's something wrong with you. Well, I'm now 71 years old, and no matter how I do the math, and I keep trying to do the math differently, I realize I'm in the fourth quarter. I'm in the fourth quarter of my life. It comes out the same every time. I've had a wonderful life so far with 3 quarters of just amazing experiences. But if I'm like you, I want to finish strong. I still got things on my list that I want to do. I have, things still to accomplish, and I hope you do too. Many people have called this time of our lives the autumn of our lives. This is the autumn. You know what happens in autumn? The leaves fall. It begins to get a little cooler. You think differently. You reflect differently. You sit by a fire. You drink really good wine. This next song on our playlist refers to the seasons of our lives. It comes from the Bible, from Scripture, from Ecclesiastes. And a great rock band in the early 60s took this song and those lyrics and created the great classic, Turn, Turn, Turn. It's the Byrds. All right, it's time to take a test. When Charlotte and I first got married, we started attending a Methodist church on Ponce de Leon Avenue in Druid Hills, a little suburb of Atlanta, called Druid Hills United Methodist Church. And we laughingly referred to that church of the church of the newlywed or the nearly dead. There was no in-betweens. It was all young couples and blue hairs. Well, they asked me to preach the laity sermon one Sunday. And I'm sitting out there looking at a sea of old people, and I mean really old people. Now, I look back now, they were like people my age now, but when you're in your 20s, they looked really, really old. And I said to them, I have a test for you today. I want you to take 2 fingers. I want you to put them right up here. And if you feel a pulse, God's not finished with you. If you're still alive, there's still things to do. So I want all of you out there listening today, go ahead, take the test. Do you feel a pulse? If you do, then God's not through with you, and there are many things still to accomplish. Do you remember the great comedian Carl Reiner? A lot of people know him more as the dad of Rob Reiner, the famous film director. Remember, Rob Reiner was Meathead on the classic Archie Bunker show, All in the Family, with Carol O'Connor. But he became a great film director and directed some of the great Princess Bride and Stand By Me and so many other great classics. But his dad was a very great comedic writer. He wrote for people like Mel Brooks, and he wrote the Dick Van Dyke Show and a bunch of great shows in the 50s. He died a couple of years ago, but he used to say that what he did every day, he lived in L.A., he said, what I do every morning is I would get up, put on my bedroom shoes, shuffle down my driveway, pick up the Los Angeles Times, open the Times, open the obituary section, and if I didn't see my name, I'd go have a bowl of cereal. Okay? If you don't see your name in the obits today, it's time to still do stuff. It's time to do stuff. We all have had a chance in our lives to be successful. And we've been successful in so many varied ways. But at this point in our lives, I think it's more important to replace success with significance. Use your success in the final days of your life to become significant. Well, how do we do that? Well, firstly, we all have a lot of financial resources. In fact, I've told you that studies have shown that 81% of all the disposable income in America today is owned by baby boomers. 81% of the disposable income. Even bigger, $84 billion worth of real estate that we own. Okay? We own this. And this money's going to have to go somewhere. Now, I find myself going to a lot of funerals these days, unfortunately. And guess what I've never seen at a funeral? Never seen a Brinks truck. You see, you can't take the money with you. You're going to leave it all behind. My dad had told me years ago, he said, do you know how much money John D. Rockefeller left behind when he died? I said, what was it, Dad? 200 million? He goes, oh no, it was all of it. He left it all behind. Reminds me of a story. There's a guy on his deathbed. So he calls in his minister, his accountant, and his lawyer. And he says, now guys, they say you can't take it with you, but I'm not so sure. So I have $5,000 in cash for each of you. And I want you to promise me that when we have my viewing at the funeral home, you'll sneak the money into the casket. They all look at him and go, okay, we'll do that. And they take the $5,000. Well, we get to the funeral. The three guys are sitting around talking about Charlie. And the minister says, guys, my conscience is bothering me. I thought about the cash, that it wasn't going to do any good in the coffin. So I only put half in, and I kept the other half to, feed the poor and do some great work on behalf of Charlie. The accountant looked at him and said, really? Okay. I did the same thing. I only put $2,000 in. I kept $3,000. I felt like I could give it to some members of his family that would need it. They turn and look at the lawyer, and he goes, I can't believe you guys. I'm indignant about this. This is terrible. I want you to know that I took out your $2,500 and your $2,000 and wrote a check for the full amount and put it into the casket. Sounds like a lawyer, doesn't it? Pretty good story. You can't take it with you, and I hope that you will find ways to take the financial resources that you have. With our individual and collective resources, there's so much good we can do, while we're still here or after we've gone. You can select a charity now or a cause now. And if you make a donation, you can see where it goes. I mean, you can watch the results of what you've given them in a way that I think is really, really fun. But you also can, one way to do that today is if you've been in the stock market at all for the last few years, you've run up a whole lot of value and you're going to pay a lot of capital gains. A lot of capital gains. You know, if you bought stock at $5 and it's worth $100 now, you got $95 in capital gains to pay. But guess what? If you donate investment securities, if you donate stocks or bonds to a 501c3 charity, you write off the capital gains. You don't pay any capital gains. So go to your broker this week and say, hey, I want X amount of dollars out of my portfolio that I want to give to charity. And you can write the whole thing off. And do a lot of good. The other thing you can do is you can include a charity or a cause in your will. Now, we had Langley Respis on earlier this year, and what did he tell you? You better get a will. That was months ago. Have you gotten your will yet? If you haven't gotten a will, the government's going to get your money. Do you want the government to get your money? I don't want the government to get my money. So I have a will. If you do have a will, think about including a cause or a charity in your will. Hey, we've got money. Secondly, what else do we have? We've got talent. We still got a lot of talents out there. One of my talents is I can cook. Now, I'm not a chef, but I can cook. I'm a cook, and I can cook for an army. I can cook for a lot of people. You know what I want to do? I want to go with Jose Andres next time there's a crisis. I want to go be a guy in the World Food Kitchen and cook for a whole lot of people. That's on my list because that's a talent I have, and I don't want to waste that talent. I want to help other people at a time that there's a crisis. I can feed people. What are your talents? You got talents. Think about how you can apply your talents right now to do good in the world in such a way. Thirdly, we got time. Some of us have retired completely. You got nothing but time. Some of us are working less time than we have before. Some of us are still working full time, but you have time. Time to do what? Have you ever thought about going back to class? You know, they waste college on the youth. I would actually go to class now at my age versus, you know, playing poker all night and calling off the 8 o'clock class and then the 9 o'clock and then the 10 o'clock. I'd go to class. If you're over 65, guess what? It's free. You can go to college for free. You can find a college in your town, go take classes. The late, great Vince Dooley, who was my dear friend, great football coach, great athletic director at the University of Georgia, he took classes every spring for like 25 years. And he ended up getting degrees in military history and leadership and agronomy and wrote all kinds of books and did all kinds of things. You can still do that. You can go to class. You can volunteer. There's all kinds of volunteer opportunities out there. You can teach. You can coach if you want to. How about coaching youth sports? You love to play softball, go coach softball. There's so many things that you can do today. You've got time to give back, time to pursue new things, time to travel. Hey, time to get back in shape, time to read, time to write. You have time. Do you have a bucket list? Do you have a list? I still have a long bucket list. Places I want to go, meals I want to cook, people I want to see, things I want to do. If you don't have a bucket list today, sit down for a half an hour and write a bucket list. What do you want to do as a baby boomer with the rest of your life? Go write it down. There's still a lot of life still out there. So I got a fun song on our playlist today. It's from a Broadway play in the early 1960s called Bye Bye Birdie. It was based on a real-life experience. We had a great rock and roll star in the 1950s by the name of Elvis Presley, and he got drafted, and he had to go serve in the Army, and they sent him off to Germany. And so based on that, Bye Bye Birdie was about a famous rock and roll singer, Conrad Birdie, who was being sent off to the Army and the consequences of this. The great Dick Van Dyke was in the movie. And there's a wonderful song from the soundtrack that I think really sums up where we are today as baby boomers. It's the classic, I Still Got a Lot of Living to Do. Enjoy that one. It's time once again for the boom. Hey, folks, today there are more needs than you can imagine. There are more people that need help. There are more opportunities to serve. There are more opportunities to give back. There are more opportunities to do something for someone else. You remember there was a little company, little small shoe company out of Portland, Oregon, the little engine that could. They were called Nike. They were a no company. There was a guy named Phil Knight who had run track for Bill Bowerman at the University of Oregon. He started selling running shoes that they made with waffle irons out of the back of a little sedan at track meets. That grew into Nike. There's a wonderful book everybody should read called Shoe Dogs. It's about Phil Knight and how he built Nike. Well, what is Nike's tagline? It's just do it. And it's more than shoes. It's how to live our lives. So just do it. And that's the boom. Wonderful song today on the playlist. It actually was written in 1934. And it's been recorded by a number of people. It's a classic song for all we know. But this version is from a baby boomer, a guy by the name of Rod Stewart. Rod Stewart is a baby boomer. He was born on January 10th, 1945, which means he's one of the oldest baby boomers out there. Okay? Rod Stewart was a rock and roll guy. There was a wonderful song of my senior year that I can remember listening to over and over and over again called Maggie May. And it was autobiographical about a woman that an older woman that he was living with at the time, Maggie May. But Rod Stewart, late in life as a baby boomer, started recording a series of albums based on the Great American Songbook, the great standards sung by Rod Stewart. This is the classic For All We Know. Listen to the words to this because it's a great way to finish our lives. I had intended today to have as my guest my great friend, Roger Ferguson, who's the Chief Marketing Officer of the V Foundation. Roger was my client at Capital One, and when he retired, he's a great example of trading success for significance. He became the Chief Marketing Officer of the V Foundation for Cancer Research. Life is funny sometimes. In the process of scheduling Roger, he got cancer, and he's going through treatments right now, both radiation and chemo, and I know he's listening, so I'm going to give a shout out to Roger, and hey, we love you. We're praying for you. We know you're going to beat this. And just want you to know there's a whole lot of people pulling for you. So when Roger said he wasn't going to be able to do it, I went to one of the people that work with him, Carrie Thomas, my good friend, and said, Carrie, will you pinch hit? Because I really want to talk about cancer today in the V Foundation and what the great work they do. And she said, Rick, I'm happy to do it, but I've got somebody else in mind. And lo and behold, she has secured for us today a real treat. We've got Harry Rhoads. Harry is the co-founder of the Washington Speakers Bureau. He is an original and still on the board of the V Foundation for Cancer Research. He's also a 4-time cancer survivor. This is going to be an amazing discussion today. Let's welcome Harry Rhoads to Shaboom. Hey, Harry, welcome to the show.
Good morning.
Well, you're in Hawaii. Tell me what you're doing in Hawaii this week.
Well, every summer I come out here for a week. It's a great opportunity to get away and play a little golf. The views are beautiful, and it's just a good place to spend the end of the summer, catch up on some reading, and like I said, get a little golf in.
Now, you're a big golfer. I'm going to put you on the spot now. You've probably played some of the great golf courses in the world. If you had to play one final round, one more time at one course, where would it be?
Well, you can't go wrong with, the really great spots like Pebble Beach. There are just so many great golf courses. But if you gave me one last round, I'd play at my home course at Jupiter Hills in Tequesta, Florida. I've been a member there for 32 years, and it's just heaven on earth.
You know, I've asked so many people that question, and more times than not, people have said, hey, I'm going to go back and play my home course one more time. There's a wonderful book. You probably have read it, but there was a writer for Golf Magazine named Jim Dotson, and he wrote a book called Final Rounds. And it's a great story. His dad taught him to play golf and love golf, and his dad was dying of cancer, and they took one more trip to Scotland. And this book is Final Rounds of the courses they played in Scotland. And there's a great scene in the book where his dad could have pulled strings and got him on St. Andrews. But St. Andrews has the lottery system. You know, you go there and you try to get in the lottery to get on. And they didn't get on. And he said, Dad, I can do some things and get us on. And he went, nope, golf is a game of honor. We played by the rules. We didn't do it. But they go out and they play air golf in the late evening on St. Andrews, where they walked the course and pretended they were playing. And it's one of the great
I
scenes
love
in
that.
any book
Hadn't
I've ever
heard of that,
read.
but that sounds
Yeah,
fantastic.
Final Rounds, Jim Dotson, something you got to read. Well, we start every conversation with our guests with where were you reared and some stories of your childhood.
Well, thank you. I grew up in Fairfax, Virginia. My father was in the Navy. He was in submarines. He got pulled out of the subservice and he became an engineer for President Truman's yacht. And my dad was from Missouri, as was President Truman. They kind of hit it off. And so President Truman said, I want you to leave the boat and I want you to go and become the administrator of what was in the presidential retreat. It was called Camp Shangri-La. Today it's called Camp David. When Truman went out of office, President Eisenhower came in, and one of the first things he did is he renamed the presidential retreat from Camp Shangri-La to Camp David. And his great line was, I can't have the American people seeing their president going to Shangri-La every weekend.
I love that. You know, Harry, somebody asked me one day recently what my political affiliation was. And I said, I'm an Eisenhower Republican. And they were like, what do you mean by that? I said, in 1952, both parties tried to nominate him for president. That's how close we were as a people. That's me. I'm a moderate. I'm an Eisenhower Republican. So I didn't realize that he renamed Camp David. Now, was that for his son? Was it for David Eisenhower?
His grandson.
His grandson. Wow.
And so after that service, my dad went to work for an intelligence agency back in the D.C. area. So we moved to Northern Virginia, where I grew up. Ended up going to university in Greencastle, Indiana. Went to DePauw University. Had a great time while I was there. I aspired to be a sportscaster, and I had great fun broadcasting our university football and basketball games. When I graduated, I returned back to Northern Virginia. My first job was at a little radio station in Northern Virginia. And then I went to work at an advertising agency called Needham, Harper and Steers, and specifically was hired to work on the McDonald's account. And it was while there, I worked there for 5 years, and it was while there I met my first celebrity, Ronald McDonald. And, you know, my business just kind of took off from there. And then after I was there for about 5 years, I had a great friend named Bernie Swain, and we came up with the idea of starting a speaking agency. Now, there was no internet at the time. So it wasn't like we could go online and find out, are there a lot of speakers bureaus around? Now, what spurred us on is that we read a story in Fortune magazine. It was funny. There's this, I think it was November of 1979, on the cover of one of Fortune's magazines, there were 7 or 8 corporate logos, one of which was McDonald's. So we picked it up to read through it just to see what they had to say about McDonald's. And as we were turning the pages, we came across this story. It was a feature story about the Harry Walker Speaking Agency in New York City. And it was quite an eye-opening article, and it talked about how Mr. Walker represented all of these prominent people, including Gerald Ford and Henry Kissinger. But one thing stood out in the article. When they asked, did you have any competition? He replied, no, I don't. And so we just took that as a sign. And so we stopped what we were doing and started our little company, Washington Speakers Bureau. And Bernie's wife, Paula, and Bernie and I just started it and had great fun. I mean, it wasn't a lot of fun at first, but as time went on, we got some traction and kind of built it out from there.
I remember some years ago, somebody said about me, Rick, you were an overnight success. And my wife heard that and said, yes, and it was a long night. And I'm sure that the early days, John Maxwell, who's a leadership guru, says everything worthwhile in life is uphill all the time. And I'm sure y'all had a lot of those uphill days, and it wasn't an overnight success. But tell our listeners the story of the handshake, because I think that is one of the most unique stories I've ever heard.
I will tell you, but one note parenthetically, you just referenced John Maxwell. I mean, what a great thought leader he is. Well, I'd heard of him for years. Well, it turns out he joined the Jupiter Hills Golf Club, and so I've gotten to know him, and he's just
He's
a
the best
wonderful
guy,
person.
isn't he? He's just a wonderful human being. I mean, he really is. And he really is, I think, the leading guru on leadership at a time that we seem to have a big leadership gap in the world. And so I kind of covet all the time I get to spend reading and listening to John. Interesting guy.
He's very thoughtful. I mean, leadership does matter. It really does. You need to have leaders you can trust, that you believe in, and who better than John Maxwell to really set a standard for others. The handshake simply is, as we started our company, our very first speaker was a gentleman named Steve Bell. He was the morning news anchorman of ABC's Good Morning America. And Bernie knew him. Bernie's earlier job was he was the assistant athletic director at George Washington University. And Steve Bell came over to the university. GW had this big indoor pool, and Steve was an avid scuba diver, and he brought his equipment with him and worked it out with Bernie that he could, take advantage of the pool. And I think, if I recall, he was doing a story, and so he went over there, and he and Bernie hit it off. And so we started our company with Steve, and it just turned out that as we talked about it, what was really important to us was a handshake. I mean, if you have, matters involving finance, you do need an engagement contract, if you will. But for representation, our feeling was it's all about trust. And, what's a piece of paper going to do? So we had an understanding, and it seemed to work well for both of us. And so as time went on, as we would meet with people and invite them to join WSB, we would just simply say, we're going to shake hands on this. And if at any time you're unhappy, you're free to leave. Okay?
And that's pretty refreshing today in a time that everybody wants to lock people up or gotcha moments. And I love the statement you made about trust. Trust isn't absolute. It's like fidelity. You can't say, well, I don't cheat on my wife much. I mean, you either do or you don't, and you either trust or you don't. And I think that's a great way to build a business. And obviously it served you guys really, really well.
It really did. And word got around about this. But in our line of work, productivity is really important. I mean, people, they believe in you, your reputation matters. And so if they would sign up with us, there was a level of expectation that we had to produce a certain number of opportunities, if you will, through the year. Funny story. Uh, in about our second or third year, we felt things were really going well with Steve Bell, so we made him an offer. We said, next year we're going to guarantee you 10 speeches. And back then, I mean, it was the princely sum of $4,000 net to him. And we got to the end of the year and we'd only done 8 events. So we owed him. And we really didn't have that kind of money hanging around. So we took him to lunch at Duke Zebert's restaurant. They're in Connecticut Avenue in Washington, D.C. They had the best crab cakes in town. And we all had crab cakes. We had a lovely lunch. And now it's the moment of truth. And we kept waiting for Steve to say, look, I realize you're two dates short, but, just double down, get me 12 next year. And we kept waiting. It didn't come. So finally we said, let's order dessert, thinking if we extend this a little longer, okay, it's going to work out. And we ate our dessert and he just kind of looked at us. So my partner reached into his pocket and he handed him a check for the $8,000. But I will tell you, it's the greatest lesson that we ever learned. I mean, you go through life, you go through business, and you learn every single day. And that was a great learning experience for us that simply meant if you tell somebody, if you promise somebody something, you have to live up to that promise. So fast forward a couple of years, and Frank Reynolds is the face of ABC News, and he suddenly passes away. So ABC News has to decide who are they going to put in as their lead anchor, and they decide to bring in their London correspondent, Peter Jennings. And so in our world, I mean, you're always looking for opportunities to connect with new people that you think will do well, that will be of interest to customers to come speak. And so we quickly called Steve Bell and we said, we just saw the news about Peter Jennings. Is there anybody there at ABC in Washington that might know him that could introduce us to him? And he laughed, which I thought was kind of an unusual response. And he says, he's one of my very best friends. So he puts me on hold, calls back or gets back on, and he says, Peter, we'll see you next week. And so we go to New York and we sit down with Peter. We had lunch with he and his assistant, Gretchen. And we just had a fabulous lunch. And Peter looks at us and says, I'm in. And it became readily apparent that he was in because his friend, Steve Bell, told him, you can trust these guys. And so in our line of work, it really doesn't matter sometimes what we have to say. What matters is what their friends say. Okay. And so again, it's that code of ethics, code of honor, that you treat people well, okay, that you're responsive to their needs. If you do that, you'll have a good business.
Well, I think, we talk about the 6 degrees of separation. I think in your business, it's 1 degree of separation. You find out what a small world it really, really is as you start representing people and who knows this person and that person. And, it takes a lifetime to build a reputation. It probably takes about 5 minutes to lose it. And you've got to be very, very careful because you never want to violate, again, the trust that you've built with your customers and with, the business community and the people you serve, because you not only serve the people that you bring in to speak, you ultimately serve those people that hired those speakers. You're going to make sure that you're putting the right speaker to the right audience so that it's going to be relevant to that group.
You really do. It's all about trust. And if you don't do a good job for your customer, they will not come back. Okay. If you don't do a good job for your client, your speaker, they're not going to take what you send them because they can't trust that it's going to go the way that you tell them it's going to go. I mean, you've got to deliver. You're constantly tested every day. You're tested.
Yeah, there's no question. I want to pivot now and talk about the V Foundation for Cancer Research. You have been a board member since the get-go, but tell me how you met Jim Valvano. How did that relationship start?
Well, in our business, as I mentioned a moment ago, it's always about trying to find an individual that you want to represent, that you know your customers are going to want. It doesn't do you any good if you try to sign up people and nobody wants them. So in 1983, Jim Valvano won that legendary basketball game against the University of Houston to win the
Harry, I
national championship.
actually was there. I was a college basketball coach. You mentioned DePaul. I was the head basketball coach at Swanee at the University of the South, Episcopal School, Swanee, Tennessee, Division III. And I was a member of the National Association of Basketball Coaches, and we held our annual convention at the Final Four. So I was in the pit when Jim won.
Wow. I can't even imagine what that must have been like. What a game that was. What an ending. Uh, just extraordinary. I mean, Derek Wittenberg is on our board, and I've never seen a human being be teased more and more about that last shot. And
About an air ball that he
keeps
swears is a
telling us it
pass.
was a pass.
Yes.
But
Yes.
uh, so so Jim wins the national championship. Now we were still growing our business, and uh, so we just decided one day, let's send him. This is a year later. We decided to send him a letter, and Bernie was the company uh, scribe, if you will. I mean, Bernie wrote wonderful letters, and so he wrote a letter to Jim Valvano, and then I drove it down to Federal Express. Now it was a Friday. Okay, there were no fax machines then, no computers, and so I took it down to FedEx, and we FedExed it for arrival on Monday morning. Now so Monday now was the beginning of ACC tournament week, and so on Monday I get a phone call, and my receptionist says it's Coach Valvano, which stunned me because I wasn't expecting to hear from him for at least a month at minimum after he got through the ACC tournament and the NCAA tournament. Well, he gets on the phone and he says, "Got your letter. Um, I'm very interested. I'd love to talk to you guys." Great. He says, "I want to come see you." So I quickly grab my calendar and I'm turning pages madly to get to like April, May. And I said, "When would you like to come?" He says, "I'll be there tomorrow morning. Here's my flight information. Pick me up." Really? So the next day, Bernie goes to, there was an Italian restaurant there in Old Town Alexandria where our office was. And he got us a booth. And I went to pick Jim up. Well, we get in the car and Jim just starts talking and talking. Every time I tried to, you know, get him positioned to where I want to talk to him about the company, he just kept talking. I figured, okay, as soon as we get to the restaurant, we'll do our business. And we get to the restaurant and he just kept talking. And I'm looking at my partner like, "You've got to interrupt him." And he looks back to me, "No, you got to interrupt him." This goes back and forth. And Jim just kept talking. He's talking about everything under the sun except what we wanted to talk to him about. So now he looks at his watch and he says, "I got to get back. I've got practice today. I just had a short time to come up here." So now the three of us are in the car going back to the airport there in Washington. And we pull up in front of the airport and the three of us get out. And my partner and I are very dejected because we weren't able to get through to him. So Jim says, "Great to meet you," shakes our hands, says, "I'll be in touch." And off he goes. And there we were, the two most forlorn guys you ever saw. And Jim goes about 20 feet and he stops and he spins around and he looks at us and he says, "I came up here today for one reason. I just wanted to see what kind of guys you were. Send me the contract." And with that, he spun around into the airport and he was gone.
Wow.
And we had great fun with him. Boy, he was just one of the truly gifted orators that I'd ever heard. He was very funny.
Well, he always tell the story of, I guess his first head coaching job was at Iona. He'd say, Jim Valvano, Iona College. And they'd go, well, which one do you own? Uh, you know, and he'd make a great joke about that. And, when he came to State, there's a great story. And if you remember, he came to State, I think, the same year that Mike Krzyzewski came to Duke. And a year later, Bobby Crimmins came to Georgia Tech. So you had, the old guard, the Dean Smiths, Terry Hollins, Carl Tacey's at Wake Forest. You had that group. And then you had these kind of young, cutting edge new coaches. And there's a legendary story that the coaches would have their annual meeting, spring meeting in Myrtle Beach at the time. And the coaches just didn't like each other. I mean, it was interesting. Terry Holland, he had a dog that he named Dean Smith because his dog whined all the time. I mean, it was Dean was a little holier than thou, and there was this. Well, the story is they get finished with their meeting, and here's Valvano in his first year at NC State, and he stands up and goes, "Where are we going to dinner?" Well, they never went to dinner, but he insisted they go to dinner. And it really changed the nature of the conference. I mean, it was, we can be friends and be competitors. We can do, and it's interesting later when he forms the foundation, the support he got from other ACC coaches, I think came from that. I take college basketball serious, but I don't take myself so seriously. And it boded well, I think, for what ultimately became the V Foundation.
Well, it's an absolutely amazing story. Jim, when he was diagnosed, how he and Steve Bornstein collaborated together to form the V Foundation. And Jim had a yellow pad, and he wrote several names down of individuals he wanted to invite to serve on the board. And where it's gone from then, 32, 33 years ago to where it is now is it's extraordinary. But it's all about helping people. And the research that the V Foundation funds every single year, it's extraordinary. And it matters. And I'm a 4-time cancer survivor. And I know that, when I was at the end of my treatments after the 4th cancer, I got invited to take part in a clinical trial involving something called, at the time, immunotherapy. And it served me well. So
I have a sister-in-law. I have a sister-in-law who had a brain tumor at Christmas last year, went to Hopkins, had surgery, lived in Maryland, and somebody told her, you need to talk to this doctor at Duke. And surprisingly, she called down there and he talked to her and said, I think I can help you. And she ended up coming to Durham and going through the immunotherapy program. And as of today, she's cancer free, or at least it's not growing. And we're blessed. And the research that the V Foundation has done over the years, has funded over the years, has led to these breakthroughs, hasn't it?
Well, it has. And there are breakthroughs every day all across the country. We're blessed with the V Foundation that we have what we call our scientific advisory committee. And these are wonderful doctors all over the country who have, they lead these doctors in evaluating. We get so many requests for funding. And so it's our scientific advisory committee, the SAC, who evaluates all of these proposals and then ultimately decides these are the ones we want to fund.
Well, I think it was 3 years ago. We were in Italy in August, and my wife felt a lump. And we came home and went and got the diagnosis, and she had breast cancer. And that's, that's obviously still a very frightening word and all that. And I had been privileged to do some things with the V Foundation over the years, and I had gotten to know your latest executive director, Shane Jacobson, who recently left to go to work for the American Cancer Society. And I just kind of casually in a meeting with Shane mentioned that Charlotte had been diagnosed, and he literally called me every day through that process. And and it was, I know she's getting great treatment, but if you're unhappy at any point, I know some people. It was that level of helpfulness was so important. But there are really kind of two things I wanted to pivot to. One is she was aware there was something wrong in her body. She had had mammograms that hadn't picked it up. She had done all the right kinds of things. You too had that, where you found yourself something wrong. And I think I want our listeners, because we have so many baby boomers that listen to us, to realize you got to be in touch with your body. You got to notice if a mole changes, or if you've got a growth someplace, or if you feel something that's not right. Talk a little bit about that, because that's been part of your diagnosis, has been self-diagnosis.
Doesn't matter whether you are young or old, okay? The best way to navigate a cancer diagnosis is early detection. The sooner you detect something, the better the chances are that you can get through it. And so for me, uh, I was walking around the house one day and my mother noticed something on my back, which I wouldn't normally see. And she suggested that I go to a dermatologist. And at that point, I didn't even know what a dermatologist was. And so I go, and he does an X-ray and of his biopsy, and it turns out that I've got melanoma. And so they removed it, and I was in great spirits, great shape for, gosh, 12, 13 years. And then one day, my mother suggested she had an abdominal aortic aneurysm in her body, and she just says, "Do me a favor, will you go get checked out?" And because I want to make sure this isn't hereditary, and I wanted to keep my mom happy, I said, "Well, sure, I'll go get checked out." Well, I went, and after a series of tests, they determined I had 30 tumors in my liver, and so at this point, the V Foundation had been in existence for a while, and on our board was Dr. Joseph Moore, who is Jim's doctor. And so I called Dr. Moore, who says, "Come see me." So my wife and I drove down to North Carolina and met with Joe at Duke, and it was determined this is where I was going to go. There really wasn't, honestly, a lot they could do. They said they had one drug that could possibly help, called IL-2, high dose interleukin 2. Never forget that. But the prognosis wasn't good because at that time it only worked in a few instances. Well, amazingly, after about 8 months, got through it and was in a good place. And then 2 years later, felt some pain one morning, and so just decided, on the side of caution, my wife and I drove back down to Durham, and they looked at me and they found a tumor on my small intestine. So they did surgery, removed it, came back, as I did at that point, quarterly, and this time they found another tumor in a lymph node, and so they had surgery to remove it. And so this has been, gosh, 15, 16 years since then. So, but early detection is so important. I mean, just a routine checkup is vital. Okay. But if you get cancer, I mean, the good news is there's so many drugs today that we didn't have in the past that can be really helpful. One other thing I want to say about doctors, as a patient, there are three things you want to know about your doctor. Do you care about me? Can I trust you? Are you committed to being the best doctor you can be? And how blessed I was to have the best doctors in the world. I mean, these individuals were just extraordinary, but the confidence it gives you as a patient, okay? I mean, you're going through a stressful time to begin with, but to know you've got great medical care, for example, like I had at Duke, it just made all the difference in the world. I mean,
Well, yeah, and part of, I think, the medical advisory board that y'all see, that goes through the process is you begin to see the research doctors that are out there that are doing breakthrough work and being able to fund them in a way. I have long supported the V Foundation, um, and the reason is you're completely funded, that all of your overheads are taken care of, so that if I make a donation to the V Foundation, 100% of my donation is going for a research grant. That's unheard of in charities.
well, we felt we've got an amazing board of people who've been in business for many, many years, and it's a very collaborative institution, if you will. And we decided we need an endowment. So we created an endowment, and out of that endowment, we pay for our administrative costs. So that, as you say, when we have our fundraisers or if individuals want to make a contribution, they can be guaranteed that 100% of their contribution is indeed going to research. And it's a wonderful thing, really is.
Well, here we are 33 years after Jimmy gave his famous ESPY speech, and yet it still resonates today. And the partnership with ESPN continues to be strong. I know that when George Bodenheimer became the president, he was so supportive of the foundation. Jimmy Pitaro continues to be that way. Dick Vitale, what he's done with pediatric cancer is just amazing. Jay Billis is another guy that's done some stuff. You've created the Stuart Scott Fund because African Americans don't go to the doctor, are underserved, and created the KYAL Fund with women's cancers and all that. And so the work is phenomenal. But I'm a big fan, and I want our listeners to know, unfortunately, cancer is going to touch all of us in some way. And something you can do is donate money to the V Foundation in a way that benefits. And Jimmy said it best, I think, in his speech when he said, "It may not save my life, but it may save someone you love." And that's the case. And in your case, you've had it 4 times, and 4 times you've been cured, which is amazing. Our good friend Roger Ferguson now is undergoing treatment, and he's on my prayer list every morning, and I know he's going to beat it, but it can come out of nowhere.
Roger's one of the finest people I've met. I really enjoy him immensely. He's a great guy. And you're right. I mean, I appreciate your contributions to the foundation. We are blessed every day. We don't take anything for granted. We try to, communicate in a way that's direct, thoughtful, but ultimately it's all about a call to action to get people to get checked out. Okay. It's vital that you do this. Doesn't matter how old you are. You should get checked frequently. And by the way, back to Jim's speech for a moment. I know you saw this, but a week ago, The Athletic with the New York Times published an article about Jim's speech. It was extraordinary. I've never seen a single speech so dissected by so many thoughtful people about the impact of his word choice. And there's one thing I do want to say about this. I love that night of the speech. So many people know about the speech. What they don't know is that there's a gentleman named Steve Bender, who was the director for ESPN that night. And he tells the story that according to the script, Jim Valvano was to speak for 2 minutes. And then they were going to keep the program going. And as everybody knows, Jim ended up speaking for 11 minutes. And ESPN has this documentary called The Speech, and it's the behind the scenes of Jim's famous speech. And in there, Steve Bender tells the story. He says, I've got to make a decision. And I just decided I'm going to let it keep going and let's see where this goes. And I firmly believe that it was Steve Bender's decision to let Jim speak the full 11 minutes that helped create the V Foundation as to what it is today. That speech has been looked at over and over and over, and it's so impactful. And talk about, standing the test of time. It's as relevant then, 30 years ago, as it is today.
He has
And
that part. He has that part where the light's going off. He goes, "The light's going off. Like I care. I've got tumors all over my body." Then he says something in Italian to Vital, and they both laugh. And then he keeps going. I mean, it's just one of the wonderful moments in that speech.
it really was. But the speech was just electric, just amazing. And the footage where Dick Vitale and Coach K and Joe Theismann came up on stage to help Jimmy down off
to get him off the stage.
stage.
Yeah, yeah.
And the other fun story is that Jim had been in clinic that morning at Duke, and his doctor, who I've mentioned earlier, Dr. Joe Moore, just said, Jim, you need to take care of yourself. And Joe says, I had a really long day, and I go home when I turn on television, and there's Jim Valvano in New York. And he says, I was stunned. So it's truly an amazing story.
It is, and y'all have done great work. The whole purpose of my podcast, Shaboom, is aimed at what I kind of consider to be kind of an underserved group, which is our generation, baby boomers, that a lot of marketers think we're dead these days. But one of the key messages, and the message of this episode is, if you're still breathing, God's not through with you. There's still a lot you can do. And I'm trying to encourage people that have been successful to trade the success they've had for what I call significance. And, you've had a great career, the Washington Speakers Bureau, second to none. But Harry, you've taken your success and you've created significance with your participation with the V Foundation. And everybody out there listening, there's something in every community. There's something out there that everybody can do. There's a volunteer job, there's a board, there's a fundraising event. There's something everybody can do. That's the message of the day. And you think about as sick as Jim was, and he was sick. Mike Krzyzewski talks about he's thrown up on the plane. He can't go. He went. And he gave that speech. And now we have this legacy. And I firmly believe that at some point when we get to heaven, we're going to see what I call the quilt. And the quilt is all the lives we touched with the stitches that we didn't know we touched. And I think Jim is able to look at the scoreboard, and he's able to see the number of people and the lives that have been saved because of the V Foundation, because of that speech, and because of the things that you and others have done.
You mentioned something earlier about ESPN. I can't underestimate the value that ESPN brings every single year. I salute the entire organization for their incredible support. It's amazing, day in and day out. We had our board meeting in Connecticut last year, and we went over and we met with all the ESPNers who are engaged doing things related to the V Foundation internally, and it was an extraordinary visit. Just one of my most favorite moments ever, because they really believe in what the V Foundation is doing. And so I salute all of them: Kevin Martinez, Lisa Kavlakis, the entire ESPN team. They're just fabulous. They really have been great.
They really are. Well, I'm going to close this way, Harry. I'm going to salute you. You've had a great career. You're not done. I love the fact that you still work. You're still contributing on that side, but your significance with the V Foundation is to be saluted and to be noted. I can't thank you enough. I think it's the middle of the night in Hawaii, and
Let's
you're
see,
on with
it's
me
6:12 a.m.
Okay, but I thank you. I hope you have a great round of golf today. Have safe travels home, and thanks for being part of Shaboom.
Been great. Thanks a lot. Take care, Rick.
We've got a wonderful song. It's the Clint Black country music standard, "A Better Man." It's now time to take a trip down memory lane. I had previously talked to you about Sylvia's Children, a charity that we have supported over the years. I have this great friend, Sylvia Allen. She's now in her 80s. She's a sponsorship guru. She taught class at a number of colleges up in the New York, New Jersey area. She lives in Homedale, New Jersey. She was on a trip 25 years ago. 25 years ago, she's on a trip in South Africa. And a young Black Methodist minister comes up to her after her speech and says, "Will you be our grandmother?" She says, "Well, what do you mean, will you be our grandmother? I run an orphanage in Uganda. Will you help me?" And she takes the trip from South Africa up to Uganda and sees this orphanage. In that era, there was a lot of AIDS kids that were born with AIDS because of the AIDS epidemic in Africa. And she fell in love with these children. And so 25 years ago, she started a charity called Sylvia's Children. And she raises money for this orphanage in Uganda, and she's done amazing things with it. They now grow coffee and sell coffee. They raise chickens and sell chickens and eggs. Every child that wants to go to secondary school has gone to secondary school. Every child that has wanted to go to college, she's figured out a way to get them in college. It's an unbelievable success story. Well, my trip down memory lane is for my son's high school graduation. We took him on a trip to Uganda, to Mbirzi, to the orphanage, to show him that his life's pretty good, and that we wanted to make sure that the rest of his life he realized that he had he would want to have a strong desire to give back. And we went there. The children were precious. Charlotte, who had been a first grade teacher for years, would read to the children, and I'd look over there and there'd be 5 or 6 of them in her lap. These children had never been read to. They hadn't had, that kind of touch. But they behaved, and they were happy children, and they were learning. And in spite of the overcrowdedness on the benches in their classrooms, and in spite of the bad food that they were given to feed their stomachs, these were very, very happy and healthy children. And I can remember that we went out and bought rice and beans, and we cooked rice and beans for them, and we gave them all a special treat. They all got one soft drink, one Coca-Cola or one Fanta or one lemonade. And I felt bad because we ate as guests better than the children ate, and it bothered me. It's a great trip down memory lane for me, and it reminds us all that we have the opportunity to change lives in a lot of ways. So what's the song of the week about significance? It's the classic "We Are the World." "We Are the World" is a charity single recorded by a supergroup, USA for Africa, in 1985. It was written by 2 great singer-songwriters, Lionel Richie and Michael Jackson, and it was produced by the great Quincy Jones for the album "We Are the World," with sales in excess of 20 million physical copies. It's the 8th best-selling single of all time and it was meant to raise money for the 1983 to 85 famine in Ethiopia. Soon after the British group Band Aid released Do They Know It's Christmas in December of 1984, where they had gone to Africa and seen the need, musician and activist Harry Belafonte decided to create an American benefit single for American relief, famine relief. And the mega agent Ken Cragen then enlisted several musicians for the project. These musicians included Bruce Springsteen, Cyndi Lauper, Paul Simon, Stevie Wonder, and Tina Turner. And Jackson and Ritchie completed the writing the night before the first session that was on January 28, 1985. The song We Are the World was released on March 7th, 1985, day after my birthday, as the first single from the album by Columbia Records. It topped music charts throughout the world and became the fastest-selling U.S. pop single in history. It was qualified as quadruple platinum, becoming the first single to be certified multi-platinum. It won 4 Grammy Awards, 1 American Music Award, and a People's Choice Award. We Are the World was promoted with a music video, a VHS, a special edition magazine, a television simulcast, several books, posters, and shirts. Ultimately, it raised more than $80 million, which is the equivalent today of $229 million in 2025 for humanitarian aid in Africa and around the world. It's a great song. This is Song of the Week. It's We Are the World. It's time to get back on the road with Rick. You ever thought about what your last meal would be? What if you could pick? You know you're going to die tomorrow. What's your last meal? It's easy for me. I'm eating fried chicken. I love fried chicken. Now, where's the best fried chicken I've ever had? You'd think it would be from the South, wouldn't you? It's not. It's from a place called the Juniper Valley Ranch. It's on State Highway 115, south of Colorado Springs, Colorado. The Juniper Valley Ranch. They only have 2 entrees to pick from. You can either get baked ham or fried, skillet fried chicken. It comes with the same side: rice potatoes with cream gravy, homemade biscuits with apple butter, coleslaw, and an okra casserole. You get a choice of 2 appetizers. You can get a curry consomme or a little glass of cherry cider. That's it. They give you a free dessert at the end. They have a homemade dessert of the day. They have a chocolate sundae, a butterscotch sundae, or my favorite, they have a peppermint stick ice cream. After fried chicken, you want a little peppermint ice cream. Folks, this fried chicken is so good. Family style, eat all you want. Ask to take the leftovers in a bag. Eat it down the road as you drive. Eat it the next day. Best fried chicken ever. Juniper Valley Ranch, I'm telling you. Colorado Springs, Colorado, on the road with the Rick. Let's play a great song by the Zac Brown Band. It's Chicken Fried. Well, it's time for the Wine and Wine. It's our last one of the season. Let's make it a good one. The other night, I looked in my little cupboard and found a Pinot Noir. I love Pinot Noirs. I love Oregon Pinot Noirs. And I had one from a brand called Go Figure. Go Figure Winery. It was a 2018 Pinot Noir from the Willamette Valley. It was fabulous. So what's the wine? Well, the bottle had a saying on it. This is what it said: because you never know what's going to happen. I just love that. Go Figure Wine with a saying, because you never know what's going to happen. You know, life really does turn out best for those that make the best of the way life turns out. So I guess I'll just quit whining and deal with it. Because life, as Ferris Bueller once told us, moves pretty fast. The longer you spend living it, the more you realize there's a lot you can miss if you're not paying attention. There are two more great songs on the playlist today. There's Journey's classic, Don't Stop Believing, and there's one of my favorite songs ever. It's the Judy Garland classic, Over the Rainbow. So it's now time for the last word. You know the great quote, parting is such sweet sorrow. That actually is from William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. It's spoken by Juliet in Act 2, Scene 2, on the famous balcony scene. This line expresses the bittersweet feelings associated with saying goodbye when parting brings sadness. But it's also sweet because it reflects the deep affection between the lovers. Juliet's words encapsulate the conflicting emotions of love and loss, highlighting how farewells can be both painful and cherished. I can remember seeing the classic Franco Zeffirelli version of Romeo and Juliet as a ninth grader, and I fell in love with the actress that played Juliet. Her name was Olivia Hussey. Olivia Hussey had been born in Argentina, and she was gorgeous. She was, I think, 3 or 4 years older than me. She died earlier this year, but made such a great impact on me, and that movie made such a great impact on me. I hope you have great memories, but I hope even more that you're going to make even more great memories, because you're not done yet. Let's close our playlist with Alan Jackson and the song, Remember When. Hey, thanks for listening this season. I hope to see you each down the road soon. God bless each and every one of you. This is the captain signing off.